Millionaire watches Maid's black son rummaging through trash. His discovery leaves him heartbroken. It's a sunny afternoon in a prestigious neighborhood, a place where nothing out of the ordinary ever happens. But today, something unusual catches the eye of a millionaire who has everything money can buy. He looks out of his mansion's window and sees something he can't ignore: the young son of his maid digging through trash. The child's small hands frantically shuffle through discarded items, his face a mask of desperation. The millionaire doesn't know it yet, but what he's about to learn will force him to confront a painful truth about the world he's always known. As he steps outside to investigate, his discovery will leave him heartbroken. Marcus Grant lived a life few could ever imagine. A successful entrepreneur, he owned a luxurious mansion, drove exotic cars, and had all the material wealth anyone could dream of. To the outside world, Marcus had everything. He was proud of his accomplishments, and why shouldn't he be? Everything he had worked for. His life was the picture of success, a testament to what hard work and dedication could achieve. But there was one thing Marcus never thought about: the life of the people who served him. His maid, a woman named Rosa, was a quiet presence in his home. She came in every day, cleaned his house, and took care of the little things he never had time for. Her son Elijah was often at the edges of his vision, running around the garden or playing quietly in the background. Marcus barely took notice of the boy, too wrapped up in his own world to think about him or his struggles. On this particular day, as Marcus sat in his study, looking out the window with a cup of coffee in his hand, his eyes fell on something strange. Through the large, perfectly framed window of his grand estate, he saw Elijah, the young, innocent child, crouched near a trash can at the corner of the property. His small hands were sifting through discarded items, his face scrunched up in concentration as he rummaged through what others would consider garbage. Marcus squinted, confused. Why was the boy out there digging through the trash? It didn't make sense. His mind raced with questions, but before he could dismiss it, a nagging feeling began to form in the pit of his stomach. Something didn't sit right. With a sense of unease creeping in, Marcus set his coffee down and walked out onto the porch, his footsteps heavy. He had to know what was happening. What he would discover next would forever change the way he saw the world. As Marcus approached, he felt his pulse quicken. There, in front of his pristine mansion, Elijah was still at work, moving discarded papers, plastic bags, and empty containers around in the trash. The boy's clothes were old and torn, no different from the rest of the debris scattered around him. He was too young to understand the significance of the scene he had unknowingly become a part of. But for Marcus, it was impossible to ignore the contrast. The child, searching for food or something valuable to take home, and the mansion that towered behind him, full of excess. Marcus stopped a few feet away, unable to get any closer. His eyes roamed over the scene, Elijah pulling something from the trash and wiping it off on his clothes before taking a hesitant bite, as if it was the only thing available to him. The sight was jarring. Marcus couldn't help but wonder why. Why was this child, who should have been playing with friends or at school, instead forced into this situation? Why was he here in this place of luxury, scrounging for his next meal? Elijah didn't seem to notice Marcus watching him. The child's movements were methodical, almost resigned to his fate. Marcus stood still, frozen as a wave of guilt washed over him. He had seen this boy every day, had passed him by countless times, never once considering the boy's life or his struggles. To him, Elijah had always just been the maid's son, someone he barely noticed. But now, as he stood there, watching the child's desperation, he realized how little he had truly understood about the world beyond his own. The guilt began to gnaw at Marcus, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. How could he have been so blind? His wealth, his privilege, none of it mattered in this moment. All that mattered was the fact that there was a child just a few feet away, fighting to survive in a world that had already cast him aside. Elijah stopped rummaging through the trash and looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's. There was no anger, no resentment in the boy's gaze, just exhaustion. It was as if the world had already taken so much from him that there was nothing left to give. Without a word, Elijah stood up and began to walk back toward the back gate of the mansion, leaving the trash behind. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding in his chest. The child's quiet exit felt like a slap in the face. There were no tears, no protests, just a tired acceptance of a life that had already decided his fate. The next day, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Elijah from his mind. The boy's face, the way he dug through the garbage, and the rawness of his need haunted him. The millionaire tried to distract himself with work, but it was of no use. The pain of his discovery was too real, too immediate. Unable to focus, Marcus found himself driving to the modest apartment where Rosa and Elijah lived. He didn't know what he expected to see, but he knew he had to understand. As he approached the small building, his heart began to race. He knocked on the door and waited. Rosa answered, her tired eyes meeting his. She invited him in, and Marcus stepped into the cramped, dimly lit apartment. The air inside was thick with the scent of something that wasn't quite right. The furniture was minimal. Just a few chairs, a small table, and a worn-out sofa. It was a far cry from the luxury of his own home. Elijah wasn't there, but Rosa's presence was enough. She stood by the door, looking at him with a mixture of wariness and exhaustion. When Marcus asked about Elijah, Rosa's voice was barely a whisper as she spoke about the struggles they faced. She told him about how hard it had been to raise Elijah, how difficult it was to make ends meet. She spoke of the systemic racism that had shaped their lives, the closed doors, the lack of opportunities, and how every day was a battle to survive. Marcus listened, each word from Rosa cutting deeper than the last. He realized how little he had truly known, how easily he had taken his own life for granted. He thought of the mansion, the wealth, the privileges he had enjoyed all his life, and how, for someone like Elijah, those luxuries were out of reach, as distant as the stars. By the end of that evening, Marcus had a new understanding of the world. His mind raced with thoughts of how he could help, how he could make a difference. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the problem was bigger than he could solve alone. It wasn't just about one child, one family. It was about a system that kept people like Elijah trapped in a cycle of poverty and injustice. As he left Rosa's apartment, Marcus made a vow to himself. He would use his wealth and influence to make a difference. He didn't know where to start, but he knew one thing. He could no longer stay silent, stay comfortable, while others suffered. The journey would be long, but it had to start somewhere. He spent the following days researching organizations that supported marginalized communities, with a focus on education, equal opportunity, and combating systemic racism. Marcus didn't know how long it would take to create real change. Still, he knew it had to start with people like him recognizing their privilege and taking responsibility for it. As Marcus reflected on everything he had learned, he realized that true wealth wasn't just about material things. It was about the ability to make a difference, to stand up against injustice, and to give people like Elijah the chance they deserved.